I think with technology, any type of technology, you have to really understand the capabilities of what you're trying to get out of said tool, right? You're going to hear it from, you're basically going to either be recommended or referred to the tool as a need, right? Look, we need marketing automation to help us scale, to help us measure, to help us do what we have to do in marketing. So you're first going to really have to kind of dive into what is the tool I'm purchasing, have the capability to do. And with the caveat of you're going to see so many things that it has the capability to do, and it's going to be to a point overwhelming, right? To say, oh, wow. And I know from my perspective, right, you tend to get excited about that stuff and you're like, let's dive in. Like, let's get to the top as fast as possible, which is the key, right? Is that as you're working with your own organization or with a consultant, you got to make sure that you're kind of crawl, walk, run mentality so that you're ramping up into what will ultimately be a very high functioning instance, right? Things can get hairy if you take it, if you take it too fast and you take it too far, right? And then you're left with complications, right? You're left with potentially, right, historical elements that maybe you don't understand, like who did this at one point, like why did we make this decision, right? You don't want to have to unravel those things. So I would say, really in terms of like key elements of success is just to stay organized, stay informed, right? Making sure that you're building a pretty good relationship with your instance, and then also just knowing as much as possible about what this tool has the capabilities of doing. It'll evolve naturally, in my opinion, but you'll quickly learn what it's going to rely on, what it's going to take to make sure that your instance is running at peak performance. But then also too is that when you run into challenges, making sure that you're asking questions as soon as possible, right? Trying to find out your resources, right? Using things like, a community or using your colleagues to brainstorm and things like that. The tool's complex and you don't learn it in a day. And you, in my opinion, right, you have to build a passion for it. You have to make sure that you have a real key focus on understanding, again, what the capabilities are, but then really getting excited about that stuff and just, trying to make ideas happen. That's what makes it fun, right? Is that you have the challenge to say, look, we can measure, we can automate, we can measure, and we can validate the things that we do. Like, that's all very exciting. So you have to kind of take that and use it to build out, a pretty robust instance. And again, if you run into either issues or you run into a point where you're like, hey, I think we can do more, I just don't know what it is. Like, that's when you start kind of sharing ideas and, potentially working with someone who's a consultant who has an expertise or what have you, and kind of leveling up, right? So I don't know. It's just I think a really good kind of marketing technology area, which is going to just keep expanding for sure.
For sure, yeah, and I love that kind of a secondary tip that you mentioned about making sure that you're reaching out when you have questions, talking to experts, talking to the community, because even the experts don't know everything about all of these platforms.
That's right.
The experts that sit here, you and the Definitive Results team, you guys are bouncing ideas off of each other all the time, trying to figure out what's the best way to do this or how do we do this.
Right.
Even you who works in the platforms every day needs to ask questions. So people who aren't working in the platform every day, they just need to make sure that they take advantage of the community and of the experts that are around them, and making sure that they're just asking questions when they get stuck, because a lot of the time, either one, you're gonna have two minds that are able to think about this problem, or the question you've had, 1,000 other people have had, and you've just never had to deal with it.
Yep.
So when people kind of start, another thing that I liked you mentioning, kind of making sure that we're starting slow and not kind of rushing to the peak on day one. Yes. You really have to establish that strong foundation. And it's about learning everything that the platform has to offer, and then kind of figuring out where are we going to start, how are we going to start this strong foundation, and then looking forward with a vision 100%. On how we're going to get there.
Yes.
But knowing that it's going to take time. You can't build this marketing automation, a fully successful marketing automation program in 1 day, 1 week, 1 year probably. It's going to take time to kind of get to where you want to be, and over time you're going to optimize and make adjustments 100%. Forever. And you're always going to be able to kind of take advantage of new pieces of that technology, because this technology is also evolving and improving constantly.
Right.
So what are some of the steps you think in terms of building that strong foundation, that people like some key like must do steps when they're building that strong foundation at the base of their marketing automation?
Sure. It's about data focus, right? So, making sure that the data that goes in is clean, right? Making sure that it's organized. And again, I said it before, but staying informed on your own instance, right? The practices that you do, right? The processes you put in place. I laugh, right? Like they say it in Sesame Street, and my kids watch it, right? Like stop and think it through, right? Mm-hmm. Think ahead. And like you said, right? You have things hanging above you. Those are the milestones that you lay out to say, okay, what do I need to get to this level, right? And that's where, like, again, data cleanliness and process to that, right? Also your organization, right? Again, I had said it before, but making sure that you have a real good plan set forth to say, how are we going to lay out our marketing automation instance, and how are we going to know how to specifically operate? And that's, you have your operational programs, right? You have the things that are going to help you clean your data, make sure that you are normalizing your data, making sure that it's clean. Like that's baseline stuff, right? Then you're going to need a really good handle around the things that you do to operate on a daily basis, right? Your templates, your content promotions, your webinar promotions, things like that. You need to make sure that that is all buttoned up and that there's not really a lot of questions, right? You should be manipulating a few things here and there, creating your assets and your content, but know what you're going to expect in terms of where do I go when I need to report on small metric or larger attribution metric, something along those lines. And then after kind of you have those operational things in place and execution, then you're going to be looking at the results of that, right? So where do I go for reporting? What are the baseline reports that I can look at to make sure that I'm evaluating the things that we've done to say what are the results? Now, it's a much larger conversation, but at the very start of things, you're going to want to ensure, right, that the things you do are reportable and attributable over to whatever it be. If it's going to be a sync to your CRM, or if it's going to be kind of out of the box reporting right in Marketo, those are the key items, because then eventually all of your actions are going to need to kind of take front and center stage with either your colleagues, definitely with your colleagues, and then above, right? You're going to be reporting out on what is marketing doing for us, right? So I think those are three key things, right, to really kind of get focused on, and making sure that as a startup, right, with marketing automation, that you're kind of keeping everything in place, and that's all scalable. So when you do that, you start off at a good point, and then again you build up from there, and then that lets you get into much more complex areas of marketing automation, which in turn then gets you to those look to the stars milestones that you're trying to get to, right? Which get you really excited about like all the capabilities that it can do. But